As they finished breakfast and prepared for the day, Olga's mind swirled with thoughts and emotions. She felt a mix of anxiety and determination, knowing that the day ahead held significant challenges and revelations. When the time came, Olga and Kaya headed out to pick up Frank from the airport, leaving Maggie to prepare for their departure to visit their grandma. As they drove, Olga's mind raced towards what she needed to say, and how she needed to act to maintain the facade they had crafted. Kaya chattered excitedly from the back seat, unaware of the weight of the situation. Finally, they arrived at the airport, and Olga spotted Frank waiting at the arrivals gate. He smiled warmly as he saw them approaching, and Olga put on her best act, wrapping her arm around Frank's waist as they greeted each other with a kiss on the cheek. "Frank, it's so good to see you again," Olga said, trying to sound genuinely happy. Frank returned the smile. "Likewise, Olga. And here's my little princess," he said, crouching down at Kaya's eye level and picking her up. Kaya giggled gleefully as Frank lifted her into the air, her excitement palpable. Olga watched them interact, feeling a mixture of emotions churning within her. On one hand, she was grateful for Frank's willingness to help them, but on the other, she couldn't shake the guilt of deceiving her daughter. "Hi, Uncle Frank," Kaya exclaimed, hugging him tightly. "I missed you." Frank chuckled, ruffling Kaya's hair affectionately. "I missed you too, sweetheart. Have you been a good girl for your mommy?" Kaya nodded eagerly, her eyes sparkling with innocence. "Yes, Uncle Frank." And Mommy said, "We're going to have a special day today." Olga forced a smile, hoping to maintain the facade for Kaya's sake. "That's right, darling. We have lots of fun things planned." They made their way back to the car. Journalists everywhere were covering the news of Frank's visit. Olga couldn't shake the feeling of unease gnawing at her. Once they were all seated in the car, Olga took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "All right, everyone, let's head home." "We have a busy day ahead of us," she said, then turned to Frank. "Have you already booked a hotel? Where are we heading?" Frank nodded, settling into the car seat. "I've booked a hotel nearby. I figured it would be convenient for everyone. But before we head there, I think we should grab a quick bite to eat. How does that sound?" Olga nodded in agreement, grateful for the distraction. "That sounds like a good plan. There's a nice cafe not too far from here. We can stop there for lunch." Kaya's eyes lit up at the mention of food. "Yay! I want pancakes, Mommy." Olga smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. "Pancakes it is, sweetie." Frank seemed oblivious to the environment in the car, chatting animatedly with Kaya about her favorite cartoons and toys. Olga admired his ability to remain composed and keep Kaya happy. Finally, they arrived at the cafe, and Olga parked the car. She took a moment to compose herself before stepping out, plastering a smile on her face as she opened the door for Kaya and Frank. Once inside, they found a cozy corner booth and settled in. Olga scanned the menu, her mind still preoccupied with thoughts of what was to come. At Hawkins Corporation, James was sitting in his office, lost in his work. He was instructing Nick on what to do when his phone rang. He didn't want to pick it up, but seeing that it was Roynald, he decided to answer the call. "Detective, what do you have for me?" "Mr. Hawkin." Roynald's voice sounded grave over the phone. "We've got some updates regarding the investigation into Olga's situation. It seems there's been a development." James sat up straighter, his interest piqued. "Go on, Detective. What have you found?" "We managed to track down Frank's whereabouts," Roynald said, his tone tense. "He's been spotted at the airport with Olga and her daughter. They are now at the cafe having breakfast together, but we haven't connected their relationship yet to see if they are lovers or if there's more to it." James's mind raced as he processed the information. Frank's sudden appearance with Olga and her daughter raised numerous questions and suspicions. Was Frank's presence merely coincidental? Or was he interested in Olga and now he came for her? "Keep an eye on them, Detective," James instructed, his voice firm. "I want to know every move they make, and find out everything you can about Frank. I want to know everything about his personal life, and what his connection to Orga is." "Understood, Mr. Houken," Reynold replied before ending the call. James leaned back in his chair, contemplating his next move. There was something about Frank's sudden appearance that didn't sit right with him. He needed to unravel the truth behind Orga's situation, and Frank seemed to be a key piece of the puzzle. Nick, who was listening to the whole conversation, was beaming with happiness as everything was going as he planned. He now had to plan his next move to make James buy the fake news that Frank had a daughter with Orga. As Nick listened to the conversation between James and Detective Reynold, a sly grin crept across his face. This was his chance to manipulate the situation to his advantage further. With Orga's predicament unfolding, Nick saw an opportunity to sow seeds of doubt and confusion, ultimately leading to his desired outcome. "Will do, Mr. Houken," Reynold replied before ending the call. James leaned back in his chair, contemplating his next move. It seemed Orga was tightening her circle, and he needed to find a way to break through it. With Frank now in the picture, things were about to get even more complicated. But James was determined not to let anything stand in the way of his plans. After James hung up the phone, Nick approached him cautiously, careful not to reveal his elation too soon. "So what's the latest update, boss?" James leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Frank's shown up with Orga and her daughter. They're at a cafe right now." Nick feigned surprise, his acting skills polished from years of deception. "Frank? That's unexpected. Do you think there's something more to his appearance?" James narrowed his eyes, his mind already racing with suspicions. "It's hard to say, but I want you to dig deeper into Frank's background. Find out everything you can about him, especially his connection to Orga." Nick nodded, masking his inner excitement. "Consider it done, boss. I'll get right on it." As Nick turned to leave, James stopped him with a stern gaze. "And Nick, be discreet. We don't want to alert Orga or Frank before we have all the pieces of the puzzle in place." "Of course, Mr. Houken," Nick replied smoothly, his mind already formulating a plan. Nick left James's office, his mind racing with possibilities. Heading to his own office, Nick pulled up his computer and began scouring the internet for any information on Frank. He searched through social media profiles, news articles, and public records, piecing together a timeline of Frank's life. He knew what he had to give James. He had already forged evidence of Frank and Orga's relationship. Frank was a successful politician and entrepreneur with ties to various industries, including real estate and technology. He had a reputation for being charming and charismatic, with a knack for networking and making connections. Armed with this information, Nick crafted a plan to subtly plant seeds of doubt in James's mind about Orga and Frank's relationship. He would strategically leak bits of information to James, insinuating that there might be more to Frank's sudden appearance than meets the eye. But Nick knew he had to tread carefully. So he devised a plan to feed James information slowly, allowing him to draw his own conclusions without raising suspicion. He knew that James wasn't an easy target. If James were to discover that he had lied to him, it would be hard to narrate the story. The trio were done at the cafe, and Orga suggested they take a stroll in the nearby park before heading to the hotel. Frank readily agreed, and they set off, enjoying the crisp morning air and the sound of birds chirping in the trees. They had a lot to talk about. She stole glances at Frank, who was trying to decipher his motives for showing up out of nowhere. Was he genuinely here to help, or did he have ulterior motives? It looks like he's enjoying being here. Meanwhile, Frank seemed genuinely interested in catching up with Kaya, asking her about her favorite activities in school. Kaya, oblivious to the underlying tension, chattered happily, regaling Frank with stories of her latest adventures. Orga felt a pang of guilt as she watched Kaya bond with Frank like a father-daughter. Despite her reservations, she couldn't deny that Kaya seemed to enjoy Frank's company. But beneath the surface, Orga knew that their happiness was built on a foundation of lies. As they reached the park, Orga suggested they sit on a bench overlooking the pond. Frank nodded, and they settled down, enjoying the tranquil surroundings. Orga, I have to say, I'm enjoying being with you here, Frank said, breaking the comfortable silence. Though I know it's all pretending, I can't deny the fact that it's a chance that God gave me to be with you and Kaya again. Remember how you used to push me away? Orga tensed, her mind racing for a plausible explanation. Oh well, you know how it is. It wasn't hate. I am always trying not to be deceived twice, she replied, forcing a smile. Frank nodded, but Orga could sense that he wasn't entirely convinced. And what about you? You came because of Nick? She asked, trying to divert the conversation away from herself. Frank hesitated for a moment before answering. Well, truth be told, I've been following the news about your situation closely. That's when I heard you were in trouble from Nick. He asked me to help you pretend to be your lover and Kaya's father, so I knew I had to come and offer my support. She forced herself to maintain her composure, nodding slowly as Frank spoke. I see, she replied softly, her voice tinged with appreciation. Well, I appreciate you being here, Frank. It means a lot to Kaya and me. Frank reached out, placing a comforting hand on Orga's shoulder. Orga, I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. You and Kaya are like family to me, and I'll do whatever it takes to help you through this. Deep in his heart, he was starting to feel the determination to make Orga his. They had chatted enough. They agreed to go home now that it was time for Orga to head home. They had plans to go visit their grandma and spend the weekend with her. As they made their way back to the car, Orga couldn't shake the conflicting emotions swirling inside her. Frank's unexpected declaration of support had caught her off guard, stirring up memories of their past together. Despite their complicated history, she couldn't deny the warmth she felt from his genuine concern. They reached the hotel, and Frank was tired from the long-hour flight. He wanted to rest, so he said goodbye to Orga and Kaya. Have a great day ahead, Orga. Well, I should get used to calling you darling or sweetheart. I mean, we need to make it seem real if we want James to buy the story. Orga nodded, understanding the importance of maintaining their facade, and chuckled. Of course, Frank-hun. Thank you again for everything. Then she gestured to Kaya to say bye to her new dad. Hey, Daddy. Catch up later. Frank bid farewell to Orga and Kaya with a warm smile and a kiss on Kaya's forehead before heading to his hotel room to rest. Bye, sweet baby. See you again soon. Orga watched him leave, feeling a sense of relief mixed with apprehension. As Frank disappeared into the hotel, Orga couldn't shake the whirlwind of emotions that swirled within her. She and Kaya made their way back to their own accommodations. Orga couldn't help but replay their conversation in her mind, dissecting every word and gesture for hidden meanings. Once they were settled in the car back home, Kaya bounced in her seat, her energy seemingly boundless. Mommy, I like Uncle Frank. He's funny and nice. Can we see him again soon? I missed him so much, she asked, her eyes sparkling with innocence. Orga forced a smile, trying to mask the turmoil bubbling beneath the surface. We'll see, sweetie. Uncle Frank has a busy schedule, but maybe we'll get to see him again sometime. Remember not to call him Uncle Frank anymore. What will you call him? She replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I won't forget it again, Mommy. He will be my dad from now on, the little one proclaimed. As Kaya chattered excitedly about her new daddy, Orga couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt gnawing at her conscience. She knew that their charade was necessary to protect Kaya and herself, but the web of lies was becoming increasingly difficult to navigate. As they made their way back home, Orga couldn't shake off the weight of the day's events. Her mind was full of a whirlwind of conflicting emotions and unanswered questions. She glanced at Kaya, who was happily chatting about their plans for the weekend with Grandma. The mother and daughter entered the apartment to find Maggie desperately waiting for them. Guys, how was the meeting with Frank? I have to meet him too. I waited for you guys and you took forever to come. I have already packed everything we will need for the weekend with Grandma. Now what you need to do is freshen up and join me in the car. The timing is not on our side. Hurry up. You will tell me the news in the car. Olga exchanged a quick glance with Maggie, noting the urgency in her friend's voice. Sorry, Maggie. Things took longer than expected, she said, her tone apologetic. But let's not waste any more time. Kaya and I will freshen up quickly, and then we'll be ready to go. Maggie nodded, her expression relieved. Great. Let's not keep Grandma waiting any longer than necessary. Olga ushered Kaya into the bathroom to wash up while she quickly changed into more comfortable clothes. Her mind was consumed by conflicting emotions. She couldn't deny the undeniable chemistry she still shared with Frank, despite their tumultuous history. And yet, she knew that allowing herself to succumb to those feelings would only complicate an already precarious situation. With a sigh, Olga splashed cold water on her face, willing herself to focus on the task at hand. She couldn't afford to let her emotions cloud her judgment, not when so much was at stake. Once they were all ready, Olga and Kaya joined Maggie in the car, where she was waiting impatiently. As they drove outside the city to Grandma's house, Maggie couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. So, spill the beans. How did it go with Frank? Is everything okay?